Breanne, welcome back to the show.
It's so good to be back.
It's been almost 2 years now, right?
Oh, yeah.
Since the
Time
last
flies.
time I had you on.
Yeah.
2 years. 2 years of mommy life.
Yeah. Last time I was here, I think I was also pregnant.
You were pregnant,
and
yep.
I'm pregnant again because, as a Catholic mom in childbearing years, it's just what happens when you see me. I'm probably going to be pregnant.
So if we have you again in a couple of years, the chances
probably be
are
pregnant again. We just got to keep it up now. It's a tradition. So
how many Lents have you had to miss out on and fasting?
Yeah. You know what's funny is it really is like I looked back and I was like, wow, for like several years now I haven't had to fast because I've been pregnant or breastfeeding, right? So it's like that whole period is like 2 years almost, and
So this is your third now, right?
This will be baby number 3.
How old are your first two?
So I have a 2.5-year-old, a 1.5-year-old, and then this baby is due in a couple months. So
okay,
we're rocking and rolling.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, very blessed.
So the last time we had you on, you had just come off of your stint as the youth minister here at St. Bart's.
Yes, yeah, because I had my first, and I was trying to kind of wrap things up here because as he was getting older, it was like, okay, yeah, it's time for me to just be a stay-at-home mom, which was a hard adjustment to step back from ministry, especially after spending most of my life in some form of ministry, whether it was full-time or part-time or, missions or homeless ministry or youth ministry, like whatever flavor I was, in at the time, it was like there was always that something.
Yeah.
So to suddenly find myself like at home and to see like raising my child as ministry, that was a big adjustment because like I knew that's what God was calling me to. I knew it was my primary vocation. Like all that made sense like logically,
yes.
and so like I understood that, but like I just felt like what am I doing though? Like I need to be out there. I need to be like evangelizing or helping people. And,
putting it in practice is a different thing altogether.
Yeah, and so that was an adjustment. But now that I've been in it for a few years, it's like I feel like I've settled in that.
It's easier for you now to see, okay, changing these poopy diapers is, my way of showing God's love.
Right, yeah.
I remember you saying that last time.
Yes. So, because there have been plenty of opportunities, because it really is something though that like, I knew that, but it's until you're in it. You just have no idea how to implement. Like I knew I was going to have to find ways to pray throughout my day.
Yes.
I knew that.
Uh-huh.
But then when I had a newborn, it was like, oh my gosh, like I'm so stressed, I'm so overwhelmed. Like it's hard to even enter into that place of prayer. And up until I had my baby, it was like for my entire life, at least my adult life, prayer looked a certain way. It was like, here's my Bible, here's my journal, I'm in the adoration chapel. Like it was, prayer looked and felt a certain way. And to suddenly not have any of that. I remember I sat down once with he was crawling, so he was maybe like 6 months old. I sat down, I had like my coffee, my Bible was like, okay, I'm going to have prayer time. And he crawls over to me and he like rips a page out of the Bible.
Oh, no.
And then as I go to grab the page, the coffee falls over.
Oh.
And I'm just like, all right, that was prayer time. All right, Lord, I hope you're okay with that because we're moving on, And so just it was hard though because I wanted to like yell, and still to this day, I'll be like trying to have my prayer time in the morning, and my kids will just be like going crazy, and I want to be like, can't you see I'm trying to pray? Like, and I want to like go crazy at them, and I'm like, wow, how ridiculous is that? That I'm like yelling at my children because Mama needs time with the Lord, but like, I'm being mean about it, or I'm being like ridiculous. They're small children, like of course they're going to want to sit on my lap and be with me and that sort of thing. So. We've made a lot of adjustments, needless to say. A lot of humbling opportunities along the way that have taught me a lot.
Have you ever thought about going back to youth ministry?
Certainly, I'd like to once kids are older. I'd like to maybe on a volunteer level. I don't know that I could enter it full time with children, but leading small groups, helping out on retreats, volunteering, for a program that's being run by someone else. I think that's feasible with small children. And then down the road when they're older, okay,
like
maybe
school age.
Yeah, maybe that's something I can actually do as a job. But it's really just going to depend on the Lord and His call. And I don't know if I keep having babies. Maybe I'll never get back into
Are you
it.
thinking of maybe homeschooling them?
Yeah, we definitely want to homeschool. I would love to do that. I love teaching. I love seeing people learn and like presenting things in new ways because okay, they're not understanding this concept in this way. I love figuring out like a way that they can. And then like seeing like the light bulb turn on and stuff. It's so I don't know, it's just so beautiful to see that.
So over these last couple of years, in between, your work as a mom, have you been able to do some like speaking engagements for youth ministers?
So actually at Faustina's, Katie, I knew Katie, from like 10 years ago. I've known her family for forever. And so she had me come out a couple times and speak, which was awesome because it felt like I was like kind of getting back into ministry without being pulled away from my children because it's easy to step away for like a couple hours to go do a speaking engagement and then come back. Retreats, it's a bit harder because you're overnight. But a couple of those opportunities like this are big when I do, I've done a few like Zoom interviews or a few podcasts and that sort of thing. And so that's been like, I feel like the Lord blessing me with an opportunity to do ministry without detracting from my primary vocation. So those have been great opportunities, I think.
We heard you were on Pints with Aquinas, huh?
Yeah.
Wow, that's big time.
That was a crazy thing because I remember I've been watching Pints with Aquinas and listening to that podcast for a long time. And I always kind of had this like tug on my heart of like, gosh, I would love to be on the show or whatever. I would love to share my story. And I thought it was ridiculous because one, I'm a nobody. Like he has on like big names. He has on authors. He has people who have like huge platforms themselves. Like, right. Like I don't have any of that. Like I'm a mom.
Yeah.
But two, the ridiculous thing is like, I know he doesn't accept requests. Like you can't just like email him and be like, have me on your show. Cause he gets 100 of those all the time. Right.
I'm sure.
And so I was like, I'm never going to be on there. Like it's silly for me to even have this desire. But like if God has taught me anything in my life, it's that like he puts those desires on my heart. And like, I just have to trust in him. So I like just kind of set it out of my head and it was like, whatever. And then, I don't know, maybe like 6 months ago, I knew someone who knew him and I was sharing my story with this person and they kind of like said, hey, Matt, you should have her on Pints, blah, blah, blah. And like, I'm like, there's no way, because again, people tell him that all the time. People tell him all the time, you should have this person on your show. And so I was like, he's not going to. But for whatever reason, he was like, oh, okay. And flew me out there and had me on the show.
Wow.
So it was insane. I was like, how did I get here?
That's fantastic.
Yeah. It's like, okay, if the Lord is calling me to something, he's going to figure it out. He's going to make the way, even if it seems impossible, even if it seems like there's just no way it's going to happen. Like nothing's going to stop God,
Wow.
So
that's fantastic.
So there I was. It's been awesome. I gave out an email address for people to reach out to me. And I have been busy with those emails, which again has been another opportunity that God has given me to minister to people. I get to share my story. I get to share about the Lord. I get to journey with people who are really struggling and kind of do ministry with them. But I get to do it on my own time because it's via email, right? So I can put the babies to bed and then go do some emails. And it also helps me because like as an addict in recovery, it's like that's a part of recovery too, is you have to continue to carry the message and help others. And also you have to remember, like you can't ever forget what that was like. Because the moment you're like, oh, it wasn't that bad, or like I got this. I've been sober for so long. Like I don't need to work the steps anymore, work my program. That's when you get cocky and that's when relapse happens for a lot of people. So it's good for me. It's good for them. I think it's service for the Lord. And so it's just been a beautiful opportunity.
The last time you were here, we wanted to get a little more about your mission work, but we didn't have enough time.
Right.
So we always said, we've got to have Breanne back on the show to talk about her mission work. And now we finally do have time.
What's interesting about missions is, and I think this is what sometimes people don't see, but it's what I learned firsthand is, I would show up to this country and I would show up like, the Lord has called me here to be a missionary, to help you people, and there's kind of this idea that like, I'm going to help you. And whether it's with physical needs or spiritual needs, right? So I'm going to, here's some money, or let's build you a house or whatever you need. Or like, I'm going to teach you about Jesus. Here's the catechism. Here's the faith. regardless, you can kind of enter this place of like almost like a savior complex.
Yes.
Of like, I'm here to help you.
Yeah.
Right. And when you show up into a mission field with that kind of attitude, it doesn't take long before the Lord kind of gives you a reality check, right? And he humbles you right away and shows you that actually no, they're going to teach you a lot more than you think you're there to teach them. And yes, he did call you there for a reason, so there is work for you to do, and so it's not to discredit that, but it definitely, there were many opportunities I had where it was like, they ended up ministering to me, and all of a sudden I was like, whoa, like I wasn't expecting this. And so let's see. Was that
like your first time doing a mission trip? That's what happened?
Yeah, so missions can be, especially in the beginning when you're still trying to figure stuff out, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of like, you're learning, obviously learning a culture and learning a language is its own process.
Okay.
And so the Lord teaches you a lot through that as well. Because you can show up somewhere and think that you know better. Like my experience is like, it was hard for me to look at people in a certain situation and not judge them and be like, oh, well, in the U.S. we do it like this, or they should do it this way because like that's more effective or whatever. And it turns out like I don't know. Like it turns out, I remember, okay, here's a good example. I was in Ecuador. It was the first country I went to, and I was living at an orphanage. And I remember seeing these kids. Well, okay, the first day I was there, I saw a bike, and it was like a kid's bike.
Okay.
And it didn't have pedals. Okay, it was just like the wheels and the handlebars. Right? It was missing the pedals. It had the spot for them, but they were gone. And so when I saw that, my first thought was like, oh, they need a bike with pedals. Like maybe I can like write my benefactors back at home and, get them a new bike. Like that was my solution, right? And then like a few days later, I see the kids on the bike. Okay. And this is how so one kid is on the bike steering and sitting on the seat.
Okay.
And he's got his feet cut. He's holding his feet up, right?
Okay.
And there's another kid behind him kind of pushing the seat for him.
Okay.
So one kid is pushing and one kid is steering.
Okay.
Both kids are laughing and having a blast. And I'm watching this and I'm like, wow, like instead of a bicycle being a solitary thing that one kid enjoys, two kids get to play with the bike. Here, I'll push and you steer. Or hey, let's switch now. It's my turn. Hop up there, right? And like it was the Lord humbling me all of a sudden, like being like, wow, you thought you knew better. Like you thought that they needed a brand new bike, like, or that my solution was like so materialistic. Like right away, it was like, well, how can I make this bike better? How can I help make their lives better by buying them this new thing? But the reality was like they were quite content with their bike the way that it was. And if I had put pedals on it, then, okay, now one kid is just going to get to ride it around all by himself rather than it being something where two kids could really enjoy it.
And have that bonding opportunity.
Right, right. And learning things like sharing and taking turns and all these other things that are great for children, right? To have like, okay, my turn is up, it's your turn. Like
that sense of cooperation. And
teamwork, all of that. And it was just like a beautiful moment where it's like, all right, I don't know everything. Or even, so at that same orphanage, it was time for me to do laundry, right? I'd been there about a week, and so I had my bag of like dirty clothes. And so I asked the orphans, I'm like, all right, where do y'all go to do laundry? And we're on the side of a cliff, so we have to go up like all these steps, and we make our way all the way up to like the top. And there's like, it's like a concrete slab, and there's like a bumpy part of it, and then there's like a sink, but it's like just cement, right?
Okay.
And they're like, here, this is where you do laundry. And I looked at them and I'm like, okay, well, can you show me how? Because like I'm 18, 19 years old.
Yeah.
And they all start laughing at me. These like 8-year-old boys and girls are like laughing. You don't know how to do laundry? I mean, they're just cracking up, right? And I look at them and I'm like, no, like, will you teach me? And so they showed me how, right? And
so I'm guessing the bumpy part is for you to...
So you're scrubbing, right?
Okay.
You have your soap, and then you have your sink where you rinse out, and then you wring it out, and then you hang it to dry. Now, we are in Ecuador on the coast. So it's already humid. It's a humid country because you're on the equator.
Yes.
But now we're on the coast. So I think my jeans took like 3 days to dry. It also rains every day. So you're running outside.
And then you have that weird smell.
And then the weird smell.
Yeah.
And needless to say, I did not end up wearing jeans again. I wore skirts the entire time I was there because they would dry much quicker. But I remember after, my arms were sore and like washing the clothes and like wringing it. And it took like hours, right? And it's just me, one person. I'm not doing laundry for my whole family.
Yeah.
And afterwards, it was like that moment of like being humbled, but like being laughed at by children for not being competent in something that like a grown adult should be competent in. Was something I carried with me though, because it showed me a new perspective as well. Because now, anytime in my head, I'm like, oh man, I have to do laundry again. I look at my washer and dryer and I hit my button.
Yeah.
And I remember, and I'm like, it's like a reality check that the Lord continues to teach me. So not only did he teach me something in that moment, but he's now using that to continue to draw me out of myself, to humble me and to say, there are moms out there who wash their family's clothing, all those itty bitty socks or all those little pieces of clothing, like by hand.
On that stone.
Yeah. And then they're drying it for days. And so like it's a quick reality check every time I have to do laundry and I find myself like grumbling about it. I'm like, no, like this is so easy.
Yeah.
Like I dump it in a machine and I push a button and I walk away. Like I don't even have to do it. My arms don't hurt. Like nothing.
It doesn't take you hours.
It doesn't take me hours, and it does a great job. And like my jeans were all stiff. I don't think I got the soap all the way out. It was just so humbling.
So when somebody asks you about, your mission work, what is like the number one story that you tell people?
Ooh.
Like, tell me one story, like your most memorable.
Yeah, so I have a couple that kind of jump out. I think one that really highlights, because sometimes I think people ask for a story because they don't know exactly what mission work means. I think sometimes there's this like, oh, you go and you meet people's physical needs, or they think that you only meet their spiritual needs, right? Like you're just there to like throw a Bible at people and then you like walk away or whatever. But one of the things that my mission company I went with was a group called Family Missions Company, and they're based out of South Louisiana. One of the things that they would do is they would have long-term missionaries in places because, to show up in a country for like a week and be like, we're going to go and make everything better, and then we're going to leave like after a week, right?
Yeah.
Like I can understand why people are kind of hesitant of that. So what we would do is we would have long-term missionaries somewhere so that way when we sent short-term missionaries there, like people there for a week, they were plugging into something that was going to continue after they left. They were just helping with certain projects or whatever, but it was like an established mission where like we already knew the community, we knew the people, we knew the needs, because that's the other thing is like if you really are there for some time, you get to know, well, what do they really need?
Yes.
Because at first glance, you might think, oh, these people need X, Y, and Z. But then if you get to know them, you're like, no, actually what they really need is this. So I'll give you an example of that is in Mexico, we were in the desert of Mexico, like up in the mountains, northern Mexico, but like desert.
Okay.
And there was this one, we heard of this one town called Kilometer 64. And most towns there have names that like towns would have. It's like named after something or someone or whatever. But it was odd that this was like almost like a mile marker. It'd be like, mile marker 5 or whatever. Like, and so it was kind of a weird town name. We're like, okay, well, we find out that the reason it has that name is because the truck drivers driving along that highway knew that if they stopped at Kilometer 64, they could sleep with a prostitute. So this town was actually almost entirely women.
Okay.
And they're off of a major highway, and that is how they are providing for themselves is through prostitution through these truck drivers. And we find this out, and the temptation is to right away be like, well, we need to get in there and get them to stop doing this. We need to like, tell them that it's a sin and have them repent. And because obviously like I want what's best for them. And I know that that's not what is best for them.
Yes.
Right? Like I want what Christ wants for them. And that is greater than what they currently have. But to look at a mother who has 4 babies and they're starving and they live in a desert and like off of a highway in the middle of nowhere, to look at her and say, hey, that one way that you're providing for yourself, don't do that anymore. Just like starve and die. That doesn't make sense either, right?
Yeah. Because her question is like, what am I going to do?
Yeah, like, what do you want me to do? Like, there's literally nothing for her to do, okay? All right. So as missionaries, our job is twofold. Like we do want to meet their physical needs and we want to meet their spiritual needs.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times where that begins, before you can even just start throwing stuff at them, because again, you want to throw money to solve the problem, or you want to throw the Bible to solve the problem, right? Before that, you have to start at the beginning, which is like loving them, which is showing them that you are there as their friend. You're there to love them for who they are. You're not just there to like change them and make their life better and tell them what to do and what not to do, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants a friendship where like that's the motive. If the motive is like, well, I'm going to be your friend because I want to change your whole life and fix everything for you.
Control you.
Yeah. Oh, because you're doing it wrong. Let me show you the right way. Like, I don't want that kind of friend. So we started showing up and we would just like help them watch their kids and just kind of befriend them, right? Start from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then the more we did that, the more they trusted us, the more they opened up to us. What we ended up doing was we were able to raise funds here in the U.S. and we were able to purchase some sewing machines for them. Okay, but even before the sewing machines, like we raised funds to get them like basic needs like running water, electricity. So like kind of meet those basic needs. We started there, and then we got them these sewing machines, and then we started to teach them how to sew. We turned part of their chapel. They had this like little rundown chapel that was like just so rundown. Turned part of that into a sewing room factory, so to speak. We set up the machines and had the electricity and that sort of thing. And we began to teach them how to sew. And they started to make priest garments. It was one of the things that we got to. And what was beautiful was as we would teach them this stuff, they started to like, you could see their demeanor change. And they started to be proud about what they did. And then when we would show up to the town to visit, they'd be like, look what I made. And they would show us like these things that like we didn't even teach them. We're like, oh, like you came up with this? And they're like, yeah, I had this idea. And they were like proud and they were like smiling and like showing like look at this thing I created. Like, isn't it awesome? And it would just be like, like a little like, I don't know, oven mitt or something like simple. Right. But it was like, they suddenly began to see a value and a dignity in themselves that they hadn't seen before.
Oh, wow.
And just that simple, like being proud for what they did instead of ashamed for what they did. We could see the shift. And it wasn't very long before like every single one of them stopped prostituting. One, because they now had, we would bring the priest garments back to the U.S. and we would sell them to then give them money. So one, they had another means to support themselves financially. But I think greater than that, they had this newfound desire to do something different, something greater, something that they knew they were capable of. Because oftentimes when you end up in that situation, it's like sometimes you don't get out of it because you don't think that there's anything else you could do.
Yeah.
Like you're like, yeah, I hate what I'm doing, but like, what do you want me to do? And so to show them like, well, look, here's this other thing you could do. They're like, wow, like I had no idea. And anyway, so
it was like so much more helpful than coming up there and saying, yo, you're doing something evil.
You're going to go to hell for this.
You need to stop this right away, condemning them.
Right. And it wasn't long before their chapel became a much nicer chapel. It wasn't so run down, and we got them Bibles and that sort of thing. And so it's like the catechesis and the relationship with Christ eventually came. But it was almost like oftentimes, at least what I have found in missions, is people can be so broken or at such a low place that like you really have to get into that dark place with them and just kind of be there for a second and to just meet them in that pain before you can call them to something greater. And I think that's what Christ often did in the Gospels, is it really seemed like he would meet people where they were at and then call them to something greater. And it's not to discredit. I mean, there are some mission companies out there that maybe show up and like their whole thing is, okay, well, we build wells for people and that's all we do. And we show up, we do that, and then we leave. And it's like, okay, well, good. I mean, that's needed too. People need water and electricity. But there really is a great need for people to just show up and be like, just them. Be with people in their poverty, be with people in their hurt, and go to the funeral with them or like go to the hospital with them and hold the hand of the dying loved one that they are having to sit with. And God does a lot through that. I think he really does more than we realize when we show up in that way.
Have you ever been in like a situation where the person's like completely hostile toward you?
Yeah, you do get that. You do get that. But what
Don't give me any of that Jesus stuff.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And so, I mean, in one way, my tattoos were helpful in that regard because I didn't always look like the missionary that they thought.
Okay.
The missionary was like some super tall white guy or whatever, and like who's like dressed up and looks nice and polished and like here I come, like tiny little Hispanic female with covered in tattoos, and it kind of throws them off. And so in that way, I feel like I had an upper hand. But even the hostile ones, what I have found is the hostility is usually founded in something that is like completely valid. Like a lot of times their hostility comes from like they were extremely wounded in the past, or they've been hurt by someone who either represented the church or who they felt like was the church or God, represented God in some way. And so like really it's coming from a broken place, or it's coming just from the fact that they are so wounded. I remember when I was in the convent, we would go to this like retirement home, and we would go and just kind of pray. We would pray the rosary with the old people, and we would just kind of hang out with them and that sort of thing. And there was one guy who was he reminded me of all the teenagers, all of those like angsty teenagers I would minister to in youth ministry. He was like that, but like 80 or something, and it was almost kind of laughable because I'm like, wow, like some people can like just be like that their whole life, I guess. But he'd have his arms crossed, and he'd just be sitting there in his wheelchair. And I remember one time we sang the Salve Regina, and it's me and a bunch of girls who are like in the convent, right? And so we sang it like pretty nice, if I do say so. Like it was a beautiful song. And I asked him afterwards, I went and I sat next to him, right? Because I'm always drawn to those. If you're going to cross your arms, like I'm going to come sit next to you, As hard as it is, like I want to be there. And I asked him, I'm like, what'd you think about the song? And he's like, it sounded like doo-doo. And that was that was his remark. Like, here's a grown man. And it sounded like doo-doo to me. And I said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Like, and I would just week after week sit next to him and just try to have these conversations. He was very closed off. And finally, it must have been a couple months. It must have been a couple months of going every week and sitting with him. Finally, he opened up to me and he started to share his story. And it was just like this gut-wrenching story of like losing his wife and then like losing his son, like in like tragic accidents, like sudden, not just like, oh, they were sick for a long time. It was like out of nowhere, right? And just, and then I think he had another kid who ended up cutting him out of his life completely. And just hearing a story like on and on and on. And I'm thinking to myself like, okay, if it were me and I had no one to talk to, and I just feel like I'm getting pummeled, like wave after wave is crashing down on me. Like life is just, okay, my wife's gone, my kid is gone, my other kid won't talk to me. Like I have nowhere, because I've been like each time I'm getting more bitter and more hardened. Yeah. And I'm isolating more. And so I have less people to talk to and nobody cares about me. I mean, why not just close yourself off? Like it would be silly to be like a happy, chipper person, especially if you don't have a relationship with God. Like now what do you turn to? And so I just, like my heart broke for him, and I just sat and I heard his story, and he just opened up so beautifully. And to see this hardened man, this old hardened man suddenly soften, like he visibly softened and opened himself up. As he was sharing, I could see like his body language change, and he just needed someone to be there with him and hold his hand and say, I'm so sorry you went through that. Like, that sounds so hard. And yes, you can take that opportunity to then say like, Jesus loves you and God is here with you. And you can say those things. And sometimes if I feel prompted by the Holy Spirit, that is what's needed. But sometimes it's almost like you need a little bit of space there too.
Yeah, kind of lay back a little bit.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Wait for the right time.
Yes, because look, I love the Lord. Okay, I love the Lord. But if I'm having a bad day and someone says like, oh, well, God, this is all in God's plan, I'm still like, oh, like just hear about my bad day first. Like before you start telling me all the night, like, yes, I know it's in his plan. And like, yes, I know that that's true. But like, sometimes I need you to see my pain first or hear what I'm saying and just tell me like, yeah, like that sucks. Like,
just
or
acknowledge what they're feeling. And
right.
Yeah. That it's valid
and so,
for them to feel that way.
Yeah, so in missions, when we encountered that hardness, like a lot of times there was a reason. And like, okay, like street kids, I remember in the Philippines, like this is another good example. The Philippines, a lot of kids there, okay, I don't know if this is still the case, but when I was there, and this was probably 10 years ago at this point, but the law was set up in a way that like minors weren't held accountable for like small crimes. And so what would oftentimes happen was men who wanted to commit crimes would get minors to commit crimes on their behalf, because then if the kid gets caught, like
nothing will happen to them.
Happens,
So you have these syndicates with the little kids.
And so then these kids are incentivized then to like, they don't want to go to school. They'd much rather hang out on the streets all day. So like these men would kind of like take them in under their wing, like, hey, hang out with me. You know, your mom's gonna make you go to school, but you can hang out with me, and then get them to commit crimes. And so there's weird things. So there were a lot of like just street kids, right? And sometimes they'd end up on drugs, and sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes it was just them doing these like petty crimes, like stealing things or shoplifting, whatever. Anyway, so we pull up one time. I had been seeing the kind of the same group of street kids hanging out, and I was like, man, we got to do something for them. So we pull up in our like jeepney type thing. It wasn't quite a jeepney, but it was very similar. It was like a crazy looking Jeep thing with the back gutted out and all that. And so we pull up, and I open the door, and I'm just like, look, you guys need some new clothes. I'll take y'all down to the store. I'll buy all of you a brand new outfit. I'll let you pick too. And of course, they all hop in. I mean, they're street kids. They got nothing to lose. Yeah. I mean, people in the U.S. are like appalled that like small children would just hop into a vehicle with a stranger. But these kids are already out on the street, and they've probably been, they've probably seen some stuff, and they've been through things. And so they all hop in because like, free clothes or whatever. So I drive them to this clothing store, and I mean, their eyes light up, and I look at them like, you can get anything you want here. Pick out any outfit, any shirt, any, shorts, whatever. And so they're all like, oh, look at this. They're showing each other all these outfits. And there's maybe like, I don't know, 5 to 7 kids, okay? Somewhere around that. Different ages, but I would say probably the oldest is like 13 and the youngest is probably like 8 or 9, okay? So they're all picking out their outfits, and then after that I said, all right, like I'll buy you guys these clothes, and then I'll go get you guys lunch. We can all have lunch back at our place. The missionaries, we had this house, and I said, we'll all go eat lunch and watch a movie or whatever. And again, I'm not saying anything about their lifestyle, their choices. I'm not telling them they need to be in school or they're going to go to hell. Like, just hanging out with them, trying to hang out with these kids. So they get their outfits. We had like several showers in our house. And so I said, all you guys can take a shower and put on your new, clothes. And then after that, like, we can all eat. And so we did all that. And we prayed before we ate. And they all were very respectful of that. We ate, and then we watched TV. And at the time, I was staying with a missionary family that was living there. They had small children, like probably my kids' age, and now that I think about it. And so like the boys were even playing with like the little kids and then playing toys and stuff like that. And they were watching this movie. And then after that, we say, all right, well, we'll see y'all around. If you see us, like, say hi. We're the missionaries. If you ever need anything, we're here to help in whatever way that we can. And then the next day, we wake up in our house and we notice that there are some toys missing from like these little kids, They're like, I mean, and the missionary kids are like 4 and 2. I mean, like little kids.
Okay.
Right? And they're missionary kids. They already don't have much. They have a handful of toys over there, right?
So missionary kids mean the kids of the...
Yeah, their toys are missing.
Of the missionaries that are there. Okay.
And then we noticed that our bike is missing. Now, our bike was how we were getting around town. Okay. And it was, it wasn't the nicest bike, but it also wasn't like a rusted, terrible bike either. It was a pretty decent bike. The bike is missing. We're like, So we get in the car and we're like, all right, well, we have to find them. We have to ask them about it. And we also have to forgive them, right? Because in a way, like it's hard enough when someone steals something from you because you feel betrayed in that sense.
Yes.
But after you like kind of open up your house to this person, to these people, you show them generosity, kindness, you just loved on them as much as you could. You laughed with them, you watched the movie, like you really... Like it stings even more. And
because you sat and you ate with them and you prayed with them.
Right.
And,
But it's like we knew what we had to do. We knew we had to forgive them. We knew God would forgive them. And so like, why would I be any different? And so we're looking around for them. We don't find it. We find one of them. And I say, hey, come here. And, he comes over and, all the other ones are gone. I don't know if they saw me coming and they took off, or if they were just, they weren't there that day, what. But, and I kind of asked him about it. I'm like, hey, I noticed some of our stuff was missing. And I'm trying to be cool about it. And he's just kind of like, yeah, he's staring at the ground. And then I said, well, just so you know, like, I want you to let also your friends know, like, that like, we're not mad and we forgive y'all. And if you want to come back and hang out with us, like, you can come back and hang out with us. And he's like looking at the ground, but like, you could tell like me saying that like made him kind of like look up like, what? Like, you're not mad at us? I mean, these are street kids. I mean, they're used to stealing, and people react a certain way when you steal from them. And these kids are used to like running and hiding and that sort of thing. And when they suddenly got a reaction that was different than their day-to-day life, it like I could tell like it shook him. There was something in him that was like thrown off completely by our reaction. And so he long story short, he ends up telling the other kids or whatever, and we end up befriending some of them, and some of them even ended up coming to church with us. We did like little catechism classes for kids too that they attend. I mean, like, they eventually befriended us after we offered them this forgiveness, after they realized that like there was something different about us. We weren't reacting the way that everyone else does.
Yeah.
And again, we didn't say anything like, we weren't preachy at them. I mean, I think we might have said like, we forgive you, and also like, God forgives you too. But we left it very simply like that.
Yes.
And we left the door open. Like, if y'all ever want to hang out again, let's hang out, And some of them took us up on it. And one of them, I believe, ended up, not only did he like turn away from like his life on the street or whatever, but one of the missionary families who ended up spending a lot of time there in the Philippines ended up adopting him, because he had nowhere to go, and he wanted to be a missionary. He wanted to tell other people about God. His life was so changed by our love and our forgiveness, and just like how we interacted with him, that like it left an impression on him. And now he's actually a missionary. So it's pretty cool.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, how that can happen. But yeah, like oftentimes in missions, we did meet people who were closed off or resistant, and in life and in youth ministry, this is certainly the case. The ones that are the hardest to love are the ones that need it the most. And it is the kid that you're just like, oh, it's so hard to love this kid. Like, he needs it the most, because chances are every adult around him feels that same way. And so what is the normal response to that? Is to just, I'm done with you. I'm not going to invest in you anymore. You're not listening to me. You're wasting my time, whatever. And they'll, teachers, parents, anyone in this kid's life is going to write them off as like a lost cause, or the troublemaker, or he's just too hard-headed. And so those are the ones that you really have to like double down and love even more, because they so desperately need it. They're used to people like just cutting them out of their lives.
Yeah, just giving up on them over and over again.
And in a way, that's what they want. In a way, they want people to give up and leave them alone, because that means they get to continue acting the way that they do, lashing out in anger, messing up in class. Like, it's like they get to continue that rather than make like some serious changes. Because if someone's going to come into your life and suddenly invest in you and love on you and like make you want better for yourself, that's scary, because that also means like maybe you're going to make some changes. Maybe you're going to have to not be so mean. And so it's almost easier to be like just that bitter, angry person. And
to be like ignorant as to how bad things have gotten for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to have to look and see how bad I am. Let me just be happy where I am right now.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's a big part too.
Have there ever been any situations where you've been like physically in danger?
There were instances. So when I was in Mexico, that's when the cartel violence, we were in northern Mexico, and at the time that we were there, it was starting to get bad. And people even asked us, like, are you going to leave? And we had to take it to prayer, and most of us discerned it, and we're like, no, like, we feel called to stay. Like, you guys can't leave. Like, these cartel guys are cruising around your town. Like, what are you going to do? We're just going to leave y'all here? Like, no, like, y'all don't have that option. So it seemed weird, or like somehow it seems selfish for us to take the out and be like, yeah, this is dangerous. Good luck. Bye. We're leaving.
How bad was it?
Well, so we started seeing stuff, and just even the locals start telling us look, don't come out at night anymore, or don't do this, or don't, and when the locals start, they're going to be honest with you, but when they start kind of expressing concern without giving you too many details, that's when it's pretty bad, because they don't want to scare you. They're not going to give you all the details, so they won't tell you what's going on, but they'll be like, don't do this, or don't go to this part of town, or don't, whatever. So that was dangerous in Mexico. Ecuador, I actually got out right before. It's so crazy. One of the convents I had visited while I was in Ecuador, a massive earthquake. I think it was an earthquake, and then followed by because it was on the coast, I guess a giant wave or whatever. It destroyed this convent. It actually killed a couple of people in the convent, some of the kids, and I had been there maybe 6 months before. I mean, I had just left. And so, and then when I was in London, I forgot what year it was, but there were the London riots that were happening. It must have been around 2010 or something like that, 2009, somewhere in there.
Okay.
There were a bunch of riots that were going on. And I remember laying there at night and just hearing the sirens just all night long as the cops were racing, and the police were going back and forth, and ambulances and stuff, people were rioting. And so even when you think oh, well, I'm not going to a third world country, it's totally safe, it's I was in London, and I was probably more scared than I was in some of these other countries and stuff.
Really?
Yeah. So there were a couple instances like that, but it's I just knew as long as I continued to follow the Lord, I wasn't concerned. I was never oh, I don't want to go to that country, it's dangerous, or I just was where does God want me? Because at the end of the day, even if I'm supposed to go to a country to die, if that's God's will, that's God's will, and I have to be open to that, right? But so my question is not well, where should I go, or where is safe? It's well, where does God want me to be? And then I have to be faithful to that. And then the rest is up to him on as far as how that looks and that sort of thing. But we did have missionaries in the Philippines, I think a couple of years ago, when I think they declared martial law for a little bit, because the Muslims stuff was going on in the southern islands of the Philippines. And so they're we gotta shut things down. And so and we had missionaries there at the time too. And so it does happen. Missionaries do get trapped in countries when crazy things are happening. And that's, that's part of it. But it's you could be anywhere and something crazy happens. So
has there ever been any situation where the government has told you have to pull out?
There have been a few, not to me personally, but I do have some missionary friends where it's either the bishop, or if they knew the local government officials, they'll tell them all right, we need y'all to go. Things are getting a little too heated. We don't want U.S. citizens here, because then when stuff happens and goes down, then the U.S. government gets involved,
hostages and all that type of thing.
And then you have the embassy, and you're dealing with all sorts of things, and they're trying to do, and sometimes it can make stuff worse, especially if the threat can see it as some sort of leverage, oh, there's Americans there, because then it's well, we can do in exchange for some money, we'll hold them hostage or whatever. And so sometimes it's just more of a liability thing. And so bishops or local officials will just kind of err on the side of caution, just be look, just, we need y'all to go home now. And so that's happened to a couple missionaries, never to me though.
No, you've never had any of those types of things that you see in the movies where a local warlord has you and threatens you all to, okay.
No, and if anything, it's a lot of times you almost kind of laugh because you see such a different side of the country than what is portrayed in the movies.
Okay.
I mean, in Mexico, it's I'd be standing there and somebody's walking up with a donkey, and we're in the middle of nowhere, and they're just so not threatening in any way. You hear all these scary stories of don't be alone because you're gonna die, and this is not these things are gonna happen, and it's just it's quite the opposite, I think, most times. And
have you ever been in any situation where, let's say, the situation is so bleak, it's so dire that it actually makes you kind of depressed yourself?
All the time in missions. In fact, it's that's one of the harder things that you're not really prepared for. You're going to see poverty. You're going to see pain. You're going to see suffering, but you don't know to the degree. And I especially hear it with some of my friends who did missions in India, that the poverty there is unlike anywhere else. I mean, people are literally dying in the streets, right? And you're just stepping over a dead body, or someone who is dying, who's actively dying. You're just stepping over them and walking about your day. And so it's like nothing can prepare you for that. But I did, there was a woman who, we were in the Philippines, and she had a newborn baby, and the baby was like in her house on like a bed, and like a giant wave came in, and like they were right on the coast, and so like the wave like actually came in, crashed through the house, and like took the baby out.
Oh, wow.
And as a mother now, it's especially hard. I mean, back then I wasn't a mother. It was still a heartbreaking story, but now as a mother, I just think about like the terror of like never seeing your baby again, losing your baby, but then not knowing, like, did they die quickly? Was it like, what happened to my child? And we built this giant seawall. Us missionaries built this giant seawall right outside of her house. It would never happen again. Right?
Okay.
Like there's nothing I can do for this woman to change the fact that she has lost a child.
Yes.
And so in that way, it just feels very like hopeless at times, or just like you feel helpless because you're like, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I could say.
Yeah.
I mean, the Lord can certainly console her, but like, I'm not going to sit there and be like, well, God will be there for you. Like, I can't do anything. And so you try to find little things that you can do to help, knowing ultimately that it will not be enough. It'll never be enough. But that's okay. And so we built this seawall so that way, like it would block and protect her house in a way. We had to design it so that way it would protect her house in a way that if the sea level ever did rise again, it would shelter her home. But there were so many situations like that. So many situations where you just see, there's this little boy in Mexico we used to visit, and he was like 8, and he was dying of cancer, and like dying, like everyone knew that he wasn't going to live for much longer.
Okay.
And we would go and visit him, and like it broke my heart. There was one time we went and visited him, and we were leaving, and he was so concerned for us, and he was like, careful in the street, careful in the street. Like, there's cars, you don't want to get hit. Like, and he was so concerned for us, like don't die, don't go out there and get hit in the the street and stuff. And my heart was just broken for him because like, he's dying and he's going to die. And I knew he was going to die. And yet his concern was not about himself. Like his concern was like about us missionaries and making sure we were safe and we were okay.
Wow.
And he wasn't bitter. He did die. We went to his funeral and that sort of thing. But it was like, there were so many situations where you're just, there's nothing you can do. I mean, or at least that's the feeling. Now here's what missions has taught me. We held the hand of this mother who had to bury her 8-year-old son who died of cancer, right? We held her hand at the hospital. We held her hand at the funeral, right? We helped cover the expenses. So we did do things. It's not that there's nothing you can do. Oftentimes there's nothing you can do about the situation to prevent what's happening from happening, or like the poverty is so destitute. Like the entire town is poor. What are you going to do? You're gonna like help this entire town not be poor, and then what about the town next to them, because they're also poor, But it's like you ask the Lord, like, Lord, how do you want me to help these people? In what way can I love them? In what way can I serve them? In what way can I allow you to use me to be the hands and feet that you need here on the ground, the boots on the ground sort of thing? So there are things you can do, and it's oftentimes not what you wish you could do. Like, I want to cure this little 8-year-old boy of cancer, and then he doesn't die, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's what I want. But ultimately, I have to be like, okay, Lord, like what do you want me to do, though? How do you want me to help? And like, what is your will for me? And then to surrender to that. And that's a humbling thing, because oftentimes it doesn't look how we want it to look. And I think Mother Teresa knew that. I think when she served in India and she saw the destitution around her, like, obviously she wanted to help every single person.
Yeah.
But she couldn't.
Yeah.
She was one person. And so to not despair, to not reach this hopeless place of, well, because I can't save everyone, I'm just going to pull out and go home because this is beyond this is hopeless or whatever. It's like, No, like the one person in front of you is who God is calling you to minister to, and you just be present to that.
I heard stories from a police friend of mine who said that, there's some cops that he talks to that they feel like, oh my gosh, I keep working and working and, crime is still bad. Do you ever feel something of that sort? Like I keep doing all this mission work and everywhere I go, it's just terrible. Am I really putting a dent in this? Do you ever feel that way?
Absolutely. And again, that's despair. And I think the devil loves to use that to leverage, because if he can get us to quit, then there's really no hope. This hopeless situation, that now there's really no hope, because the one person who could maybe bring Christ's light into it is pulling out because they're so frustrated. So I saw this a lot in youth ministry, I would meet with teenagers all the time, and we'd meet over coffee, or I'd go and get them food or whatever, and we would sit and we'd talk, and they would talk about these things that they want to change, or and I would obviously try to help them in the ways that I could. I remember this one kid, I just saw his life go from bad to worse. It went from like, okay, you're smoking a little weed here and there, to like, okay, now he's kind of messing around with some harder drugs. Okay, now he's like sleeping with his girlfriend. Okay, now he's drinking till he's blacking out at night and hiding bottles under his bed. Okay, now he's shooting up heroin. Like, I just saw it go. And this is over the course of, I don't know, I am journeying with him now for about 2 years.
Okay.
Meeting with him semi-regularly, okay? He has a good Catholic family. He's an altar server, right? And yet he has this other life going on, and it's just going from bad to worse. And I'm meeting with him pretty regularly, and I'm giving him advice. I'm trying to help him, and I'm trying to love on him in spite of this brokenness. And it's starting to get frustrating, because every week I check in, and it's like he would not only not do the thing I told him not to do, but he would do the opposite, and
make it worse.
Right. So I'm like, oh, and I remember taking it to prayer, and I was like, Lord, is this wasting my time? Like, should I be helping someone else? Like, if this kid is not receptive to what I'm saying, to what you're trying to do in his life, maybe I should spend my time elsewhere. Maybe there's a kid who is going to be receptive and is going to make changes.
Maybe there's a battle I can win.
Right. And I think that's why a missionary or anyone who's in ministry has to have their prayer life as the number one thing, because there is a level of discernment. There's prudence. Sometimes you have to set boundaries, some kids who like blow up your phone at all hours of the night, like at some point, maybe you do have to set boundaries for those kids. Or maybe you don't. Like it's really hard, because people are so complex and situations are so nuanced. You can't possibly know on a blanket statement like, yep, this is when, or this is not when. And each kid I ministered to is always like on a case by case basis. And I just felt like the Lord was telling me, like, keep pouring into this kid. Like, just keep doing it. Like, as much as disappointed as you are week after week, know that like I am even more disappointed as his loving father, as the God of the universe who loves him so much greater than you could ever love him. Like, that much greater is my disappointment in him week after week. And yet I'm not giving up on him. And so God was really convicting me to not give up on him, because Christ isn't giving up on him, right? Okay, Lord, fine. So at some point he texts me, it's like 2 a.m, and he texts me and he says, I just bought drugs, but I don't want to do them. And I said, okay. I said, where are you? He's like, well, I'm at my house. And I said, okay. I said, well, what if we meet up and you can give your drugs to me, and then you don't have to do them. And he's like, well, I spent money on it. Like, I spent a bunch of money. And I said, okay. I said, well, what if I buy them from you? I give you your money back, so that way, like, now you've lost nothing. You can give them to me. I'll give you the money, and this will be. And he was like, all right, well, let's just meet up. Let's just meet up. I said, okay. So we meet up. We're in a like parking lot.
Okay.
At like 2 a.m, right? And I'm standing there, and he gets out of his car and he hands me a baggie of heroin and a baggie of meth. Okay.
Wow.
And I didn't really think this through, and now I'm like, now what do I do? Like, I just showed up, and so now I'm like, I look at him, because I'm an addict, right? And so like, I look at this kid and I say, look, do not take your eyes off of me. And so I pop my trunk and I'm looking for something in my trunk and I find like a Coke can and I like dump the drugs in the Coke can and I add like some Freon to it and shake it up, put it in a bag and I like toss it in the
So it's
dumpster.
unusable.
Yeah. Like I dissolve it in there, right? And maybe I created some sort of super drug in the process or something because I'm just like mixing chemicals there, but whatever. Throw it in the dumpster. And he just kind of stood there and I just kind of stood there with him. And we just kind of stood there in the parking lot in this moment. And obviously the consequences of taking that risk, again, this is why you have to pray and discern things, right? If the cops had rolled up.
Oh gosh, that's a drug deal.
I'm going to jail, right? Like these drugs are in my hands.
And there's a money exchange.
There's money, he didn't end up taking my money.
Okay.
But it's like, I couldn't help but feel like that's what Christ wants to do for me or has done for me so many times. Like you have, you got yourself into this situation, like give it to me. Like give me your burden. Like let me help you carry that cross. You don't have to carry it alone. Like I just felt like that, like if Christ were here, that's what he would do. He would show up for this kid in the middle of the night like that, pull up to a parking lot and say like, I'll take that from you. You don't have to carry this alone. Like, I will help you fight this thing. And so I was like, yeah, like I have to do this, and I put myself out there like that. And, 30 days later, he sends me a picture and it's of in Narcotics Anonymous, they give out these little chips when they hit certain milestones of sobriety. And it was a 30-day sober chip.
Nice.
And I cried when he sent me that picture. I cried because it was like, sometimes people need help in a way that like at first just seems crazy. Like, no way I'm going to do that. Like, are you kidding? It's 2 a.m. I'm not getting out of my bed. Like I have work tomorrow. But it's like, it was the start of something beautiful for him. And this was a kid who I wanted to give up on. Okay. Now I will say like the road continued for him. The journey continued. Now he is clean. He has been clean for a while, but there were definitely ups and downs after that too.
Of course. Yeah, sometimes it happens, yeah.
But I think sometimes I'm tempted to want to give up on people, and it's like the miracle is like it's right there. Like the thing that God is going to do to finally break in and penetrate and get into their heart and like just love on them. Like that moment is right there, but I'm getting frustrated right before that, right? And I want to just throw in the towel. And I think that's why we have to pray, especially in ministry, because maybe we're called to just persevere just a little bit more, to just love on them a little bit more. And, and I tend to want to quantify or qualify things of like, oh, well, this was successful ministry. Oh, I had this youth event and this many kids show up, or these many kids got confirmed, or these many kids had a conversion experience. And God doesn't work like that. Like one soul to him is just as important as a million souls.
Yes.
I mean, like that's the truth. Like but we and myself, I think especially can just say, well, because only 3 kids showed up to the Bible study, I'm just not gonna. It's not worth my time. And I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of writing people off. Another girl that comes to mind is, I was teaching theology of the body at a pregnancy resource center for pregnant moms who were like 15 and 16 years old.
Okay, so at risk.
Very young, crisis pregnancy, at risk, like they're coming from broken homes or the boyfriend's abusive. I mean, and they're young on top of that, okay? And I'm teaching this theology of the body class, and this girl is she's sitting there in the front row, and on the very first day of class, she has her arms folded. And on the very first day of class, she raises her hand. She said, "Hey, miss, just so you know," she's like, "I don't believe in none of this Jesus stuff, okay?" And I said, "Oh, okay, like, that's cool. Thank you for being here anyways." She's there because she has to be there. It's part of their classes. And, but week after week I would go, and what I did was, because she said that so early on, I'm like, all right, there's no way I'm getting through to her, but all these other girls are listening to what I'm saying, and they're being receptive. And so I'm going to, continue to pour into these other girls. And then on like the last day of class that we had there, after weeks and weeks and weeks of me going and her having the same attitude every single time, she comes up to me, and I'm talking to one girl, and she kind of hands me this like little piece of paper, and I just kind of grab it because I'm talking to this other girl, and she like walked off right away. And by the time I finish up this conversation with this girl, I go to look at this paper. She's already gone. And I look at this paper, and I open it up, and she wrote in it, she put, "Thanks." She put, "You helped me want to go back to the Lord."
Oh.
And she's like, and then she signed her name. And I am devastated because like I had dismissed her. I had completely written her off in my head. From that first class, I thought, she's too far gone.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord's never going to break through to her. And I had just put her out of my mind completely.
Mm-hmm.
And when she handed, and I still have that note, I have it actually in a little frame, because it reminds me that like no one is ever too far gone for the Lord, first of all. And second of all, that's not my call to make. If I'm in a situation and God is asking me to be of service, I'm not supposed to like analyze people and be like, well, this person I can break through to, but this person I can't, or this person's drug problem is worse than this person. So that like there's hope for this one, but not like, how prideful is that of me to think like I can somehow know the effects that the Lord can have on people through me, right?
Yeah.
Like I can't possibly know the depths of this person's heart like the Lord does. And I kept her note because I never wanted to forget that. I never wanted to like write off someone again like that, because I did. I mean, I just completely was like, whatever, someone else will have to break through to her. You know, I'm not going to waste my time with that.
Wow.
And so there were opportunities like that. And I think of another friend, and this was just a friend I had in high school. And they were like one of those like super angry atheists, super angry, super hostile, super bitter. And I was pretty active in my faith in high school. Like I was going on retreats, I was doing the youth conferences and all that stuff. And this friend of mine was just like a bitter, angry atheist. So I was just like, you know what? I'm not even going to try breaking through to this person, try talking to them about God. And years later, after high school, I run into them at the grocery store, and they have a cross around their neck. And I was like, wow, like, it's so good to see you. And like, I kind of brought it up. I was like, so it looks like you have a cross on your neck. And because they weren't just an atheist. They were one of those atheists that had to let like everyone know that they were an atheist and that there is no God, and anyone who believes in God is stupid and blah, blah, blah. Like they were one of those. And so they were like preachy atheists almost. And so like for them to be wearing a cross necklace was just like it was such a stark thing for me to see. And he said, I found Christ and my life has completely changed. He's like, it's so much better now. And then he looked at me and he goes, why didn't you ever say anything? And I was like, I'm sorry. And he's like, I knew that you were active in your church. I knew that like you were going to all these things. He's like, and you saw me. He's like, you saw how miserable I was. You saw how angry I was. You saw how lonely I was. He's like, and you never thought to tell me? You never thought to tell me about like this guy Jesus who could help me, who could save me, who could change my life in such a radical way and make me a new creation.
Oh, wow.
And I'm sitting there and I'm just like, this isn't a grocery store, you know. It's just like, oh, man. I mean, he had a point. Why didn't I tell? Well, I didn't tell him because I thought, well, there's no way I can do anything to change him, blah, blah, blah. Okay, regardless. Like, we don't know. Like, maybe I would have planted the seed and maybe his conversion would have happened a lot earlier and he would have spent a lot less of his life so miserable because I planted that seed. And, so maybe I wasn't going to be the one who made a huge difference. But I can't see through the lens that God sees. Mm-hmm. And so in ministry and in missions, it really is just about me praying and saying, Lord, how do you want me to be in this situation? Well, give me the words to say, Holy Spirit, be my guide. Like, it's just surrendering in those little moments because I can't possibly know how to save people. And sometimes it's not my job to save people. Yeah. Like, sometimes that's somebody else's job is to step in and help this person in this or that way. But my job is to figure out, well, how does God want me to be in this way?
Maybe
and ultimately,
you're just there to lay groundwork.
Yeah, maybe I'm the groundwork crew. Like Mother Teresa, again, I go back to her because she was in such an extreme environment and a situation. Like, she laid the groundwork. She started this community, and now they're everywhere. Every country I went to, we ran into missionaries of charity. Nice. Every country I went to, they are there. They are doing it. They are in the trenches. She had no idea that the day would come that they would be. She probably just thought like, okay, I'll start this community. We'll be here in India, and this is, we'll help the poor in India. Not realizing that one day it would be like thousands and thousands of sisters all over the world helping the poor. Like, so that,
you mentioned earlier that, I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, go ahead.
You mentioned earlier that you said something about miracles. Have you ever witnessed any miracles while you were doing your mission work?
You know what's funny about miracle stories is there's so many that like, it's not that like I forget them, but like I just, because I was in missions for so long, or just in ministry in general, because it happens here in the U.S. too. It's not like miracles only happen in other countries, but anywhere from like from physical healings, I've seen a ton of those. Like praying for the intercession through the intercession of certain saints. I've definitely seen those sorts of healings even before my eyes. But a lot of times, we would see miracles that were like, okay, like I can think of an example. One of them was, it almost seems so little that you're like, no one's going to think this is a miracle, but it was. I wouldn't have believed it if I wasn't there. So I'm going to say that it is one. My mission partner and I were in Ecuador, and she had gotten a benefactor had given her money for like a nice laptop so she could blog while she was down there. Because this was maybe 15 years ago, and this was before YouTube and all that. And so it was like blogging and that sort of thing. And she had prayed and she had said, Lord, like, I'm only going to do a blog if somebody provides. And if they provide a laptop for that, or like the means for that, that's like, all I want to use that laptop for, like, is just to do this thing that they're providing for, and that sort of thing. So someone provided for it. So she was very faithful to that, of like making sure that this laptop was only used for God's glory and sharing mission stories on her blog. Okay. And we were about to leave. We were going to go to a different part of the country. We were leaving the orphanage that we were at. And right before we go, she says, hold on a second. And she runs back into our place. And you know, at the time, it's like when you have a roommate, they're starting to get on your nerves. And I'm just like, oh, we're already late. Now, what's she running back into the room for? Like, here I am getting upset with her. Like, come on, we got to go. Like, and out of nowhere, she thought to move her laptop from one. It was on one place on the floor, and she moved it to like another place on the other side. It's still in the same room, but she just moved it to another place. Okay. Also on the floor. And I was like, okay. She didn't even tell me that that's what she did. She's like, okay, we can go now. And so we left, and we were gone for like, I don't know, we were gone for about 2 weeks. And when we get back to our rooms there at the orphanage, there's like 6 inches of water. I opened my door to my room, and there's like tons of water, like 6 to 8 inches of water in the room. Okay. And I'm like staring at my room, and like my catechism's like waterlogged. It's like floating there, like all this stuff. Because we also didn't have furniture. We had like a bed. And so like all of our stuff was just on the floor. On the floor. Okay. Right. We're at an orphanage. What are you going to do? You're going to ask them for furniture at an orphanage? Come on. So everything's on the floor. And she was like, oh my gosh. So she runs into her room. And like I said, I would not believe this story if I didn't see it with my own eyes. But I walk into her room with her. And her entire room is also flooded with that much water. But there's a ring around her laptop where her laptop is, and it is bone dry. There's just like a ring. What? Around her laptop, and her laptop did not get touched by a single drop of water. Now,
so like a ring of just dryness.
Yes.
Like Moses parting the Red Sea type of.
Like I said.
In 6 inches of water.
Yes. It was wild to see. Okay. So again, I wouldn't believe that story if someone told it to me. But because I was standing there and saw it with my own eyes, I can believe it, because I'm like, I stood there and I saw it with her. And we were, and the spot where like her laptop had been right before we left and she moved it, that spot had, you know, like 6 inches of water or whatever, like that, I mean, completely covered. And just before we left, like the Holy Spirit prompted her to move her laptop. She couldn't have told you why. She just felt like she had to go back in and move it to a different spot. Wow. And that is the one spot in her room that didn't get a single drop of water. Wow. Okay, so you see that and I'm like, all right. I mean, that's pretty miraculous. Yeah. But again, it seems like kind of these small things oftentimes. And there were a couple of other times too where it was like, you know, we lost someone. We did a short-term trip. Well, we were going to World Youth Day in Spain, but first we were in London, and we had brought a guy with us, and I think he was from Peru. He did not speak a lick of English though, and we're in England. Okay. and we lose him. He somehow gets separated from our group. Okay. He doesn't speak any English. And he has no idea where we're staying, like the church we were staying at, because we hadn't even made it there yet. We were trying to get from the airport to the place we were staying.
So you just arrived and you lose somebody.
We just arrived. Okay. And we had lost him. And you know, the riots are happening. There's like police rushing everywhere. Of course, they're all so busy with these riots that like when we go to the police station to report this missing guy, they don't care whatsoever. Okay.
Yeah, because they've got
other things to do.
Yeah.
We sat in that police station for hours to report this, and they just kind of like took a few notes, and they're like, "Yeah, okay, if we find him, we'll let you know." And we just wander back to the place we were staying at, which like I didn't even quite know what part of town we were staying at yet or whatever. And I'm like, there's no way this guy's ever going to figure out like where we are.
Yeah.
You know, and we were translating everything for him because he didn't speak any English. And so I'm like, unless he can find someone, but even if he finds someone who speaks Spanish there in England, like, what's he going to say? Because he's there with a group and like he doesn't,
yeah,
they don't know us, and I mean, it just seemed like such a dire situation. Of course, we're praying when we're praying, and just have no idea how we're going to find this guy or how he's going to find us or whatever. And we're in a city of, I don't know, London's like 8 or 12 million people or something around that, like massive city.
Yeah.
And we just go back to we were staying in like a gym of a school that was connected to a church or something like that. It was one of those things where you're just kind of sleeping on the floor somewhere for a couple nights.
Okay.
And somehow this guy just so happened to he ended up going into a store or something like that. It was like he went into a store. And that's how he got separated from us. And the group kept going and whatever, blah, blah, blah. And when he came out from the store, he had no idea where we had gone. And we didn't know that he was missing yet. Like we were just moving on. We thought we had everyone with us. We were a group of maybe 20 people. So we were like, okay, everyone's here. Let's go. And so then he goes back into that store. And it just so happened that there was someone else in there who I guess was like eavesdropping. They were listening. We weren't even talking to them. It was like 2 of the people in our group were talking, and they overheard. This person overheard these 2 people talking, and these 2 people just so happened to be talking about, okay, after this, we're going to go to this one restaurant and then we're going to go to our place. And they mentioned the place or whatever. And this person just happened to hear it. And so when this guy wanders back in there and he's lost, he's looking for this group, the person is like trying to communicate with him. Again, there's a language barrier that's there, but this person can kind of tell like, oh, that group that was just here, like I just heard these people saying.
Yeah.
And so they're like writing it down for him. And he then just has this piece of paper, and again, no map. He has no way. This is kind of before cell phones, so he has no way to find us. But now he at least has the name of the place that he's got to get to, and so he just keeps stopping and stopping people on the street and like pointing. You know, it's England; they're not the most hospitable type over there, but he just keeps like pointing, and he's like. He makes it like a couple of blocks and then he points again and someone gives him, because people who are explaining the full directions to him, he can't understand.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're going to make a left over here, then you're going to go this many feet.
He has no idea. And so he's literally having to rely on 5 or 7 different people to get to us. And he makes it back there. Now, of course, we're at the police station for several hours.
Oh,
and he's there waiting on us. Anyways, we found him, and to me, that's miraculous.
Yes,
how do you navigate a city of that many people? I mean, and how did someone just so happen to overhear us and know where we're? I mean, there's so many people there, and that person could have also walked out of the store before he realized that this guy was lost. You know, he could have overheard the conversation and then been like, "Okay, I got my things. I'm headed out."
It's what are the chances? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, yeah, that was absolutely the Lord helping us out.
So if you run into somebody who thinks about maybe I want to do some missionary work, maybe I want to do, what do you tell them? What advice do you give them?
Well, first of all, my first advice is not just what if someone is thinking of it, but every single person has the call to be missionary. Mm-hmm. Now, to what degree? Not everyone is called to be a foreign missionary. Mm-hmm. But I think it was in Pope John Paul II wrote an encyclical letter called Mission of the Redeemer. And it's got the Latin name or whatever. But there's this great line in it where he says, "No believer in Christ, no institution of the church can avoid the supreme calling, the supreme duty of this calling, and that is to go out to all the nations and to preach the good news," or something like that. I think to go out and bring Christ to all peoples, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So no person, no believer in Christ, which is all of us Christians. Okay, so you're saying, okay, if you believe in Christ and no institution of the church, and this is one of the things I oftentimes see parishes that are like thriving, and they have these great, the Knights of Columbus are doing this, and the Guadalupanas are doing this, and they have these great communities these little ministries that are doing these great things within the parish, which is good, and we need that because we need something to invite people to.
Yes.
But then when I'm like, okay, like, where's the prison ministry? Or where's the people who are like going to visit like the shut-ins? Or where are the people who are like, it's much harder to find some of those like, where's the homeless ministry? Oh, well, we have a St. Vincent Ball food bank. Okay, great. But like, who's going to the homeless people under the bridges and hanging out with them and talking to them and bringing them Christ? Because although it's important to set up a food bank somewhere and feed them, you're still relying on them to come to you instead of you going to them. So missionary is like that going forth. That's why Christ had that great commission. Like he sent them forth, not just like, hey, set up shop somewhere and wait for people to come to you.
Yeah.
There was this like active like pushing, no, you go to them. Mm-hmm. Okay. And our church is as big as it is because of missionaries.
Yes.
I mean, there's no arguing that. Look at the history. I mean, and so
from the apostles spreading out to
to religious orders to I mean there are entire countries that were converted and entered into Catholicism because of missionaries. Okay, so we all have this call, and so my first thing when someone says like they're thinking about doing missions, it's like, okay, like, yes, first of all, yes, you're right to have that hunch, to have that desire to like, I need to do something. That is from the Lord, and that's a beautiful thing. And then it's a matter of discerning, like, okay, to what capacity is God calling me to serve, and in what way? Because oftentimes what ends up happening is people say, I really want to do missions, but like I just don't. I mean, how am I going to get the money? Or I'm in school right now, or I got this thing going on, or that thing. It's like, okay, sometimes we're called to be missionary where we're at. There's still a going forth. Like, you still have to put yourself out there. You still have to get out of your comfort zone. You have to make sacrifices. But you don't necessarily have to leave everything. But I will also say that sometimes God does call you to leave everything, and that includes your school and your finances and all these other things, and you're supposed to just like go, because that's how urgent the call is, and to know that he's going to provide in that process. And I left, had a plan and was trying to like get my life together and do all these things. And I left all that because God's call was so like strong that I realized like, okay, like if the Lord wants me to finish school one day, he can call me back to that too. Just as he's calling me away from college, he can call me back to it. And okay, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do after missions, but like, I don't have to actually know that, because this is where he's calling me to now. And this is what I need to do now. And, so first it's just like discernment. I mean, it comes back to prayer again of like really like asking like, Lord, are you calling me to leave everything? Because like Jesus did call some people to do that.
Yes.
Leave everything behind. So all you have, give alms to the poor, go out to all the nations, preach the good news. Like sometimes he does call us to leave everything. But other times the calling is there, and then we have to kind of discern it. And then we see that like, okay, no, the Lord is calling me to serve in this capacity, which means I don't have to leave everything, but I am going to have to make some sacrifices along the way. And to just have a radical trust in the Lord, that if he's calling you to it, he's going to give you the grace. Because that's the other thing, is people will tell me like, oh, I don't know enough about my faith to talk to other people. And like, trust me, there were many times I was in missions and I'm like, I have no idea what I need to say to this person, or I don't know, like I don't have a degree in theology or, anything impressive like that. And God just would always provide the words and what he needed me to say and what he needed me to do. And again, it was just, that was my mind again being like, well, I can't do this because I'm not good enough. I'm not qualified. I'm not smart enough. I don't have the degree. And, that's not true. There are so many saints that we've seen, or just people who can serve in whatever way that God is calling them to. And not everyone is called to teach theology, right? So
like you said, sometimes you just need to be there for someone.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, oh, I can sit next to someone and hold their hand. Like, I can do that. I don't need a degree for that. And to not downplay those moments, because they're just as critical as the person who has the theology degree and can help, can do this debate and convince someone of God's existence or whatever. Like, yeah, we need those people, but we also need these other people who are gonna sit and break bread with people who are suffering and alone.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule as a mom, coming in here to tell all these awesome stories. I'm sure there's a lot more, but we know you're busy.
There's so many more. There's so many more. We didn't even get to like homeless ministry, and we touch a little bit about that. But like, I just want to just encourage people and to know that like God is the one who's ultimately doing all of it, and like just show up. Like, just show up and love where he's calling you to love, and in the little ways, and to not downplay that. I mean, I think Teresa of Lisieux was really big on like, doing small things, but with great love. And it's like, okay, I can do little things, I can do little things, and to just allow the Lord to then do with that what he's ultimately going to do, which is beyond my understanding to begin with. So it's not like I need to know what he's going to do with it.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I just need to know where he's calling me and be obedient to that. So anyways, it was a great pleasure.
Thank you so much. God bless you. We're going to have you again. Hopefully it won't be another couple of years, but
I'll probably be pregnant again, but we'll be here. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So
God bless you.
Thank you.